Hello everyone and welcome to CG Buildup, and today we're going to be talking about the random value node found in the utilities node in geometry nodes. Without any further ado, let's get into the tutorial. So I'm going to start off by clicking away to remove the splash screen. I'm just going to inverse my selection and delete the lamp and the camera. So I'm just going to select this cube, the default cube, and go to the geometry node workspace and reduce the spreadsheet window and look from the very top, and I'm going to click on the new and add in a grid, and simply like that. Maybe I should increase the size a bit to something like 3 or maybe 4 might look good, and the vertices maybe to something like 5. I'm just going to this place here. I'm not actually muting it, but to the viewport overlay is called, and check on the wireframe just to see these wires. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to extrude this grid, and currently it has extruded to that much. Now here I'm going to use the random value node, and currently we're extruding faces, and here I'm going to connect in a random value node to something like that. And by looking at it, essentially, as you can see, is that each of these faces, okay, originally each of these faces have been extruded to a certain value on as you can see here, they have been extruded to a certain amount, each within its own random amount based on this minimum and the maximum, where the minimum is 0 and the max is 1. There is currently no one that it has been extruded to 0, and this seed is simply that if you see the random values assigned to these faces are not as to your liking, you can change the seed in order to get to your liking as well. And now let's say maybe we subdivided the mesh like this, maybe to something like, yeah, something like 3, okay, and it is extruded in the same way. You see some blocks created by the extrusion, each one to set to a random value, and this is actually used in making procedural cities sometimes, but I'm not going to do that. We're just talking about the random value. And so far we've talked about the mean, meaning all this, there is no face that has been extruded to exceed 1. Okay, as you can see, the minimum level is 1 meter as directed by this node, and the minimum is 0, and maybe there is a 1 0 in the middle. And now let's talk about the ID. Currently right now each face has its own value, okay, there is no one dependent on another. But let's say we want a collection of faces in one place to be extruded in the same way. For example, let's just capture an attribute before the subdivision, and that attribute is an integer of every face, okay, and that integer is the index of every face, because after subdivision each face has its own index, okay, new faces have their own indexes. So I'm going to connect this attribute and connect it to the ID. Okay, now we get something like this, because these newly formed faces here were already once had one single ID, and together, or one single index, and together they have used their original index as their ID, meaning that together as a collection they are given one simple random value. So ID is like a certain way of controlling the randomness, okay, that give it some randomness, but make sure these ones together are, make sure they have the same kind of value, simply like that. And this can be useful because nature has the same characteristic, that everything is random, but there is an order, that this will have this range, this will have this range, about this range, you know, like there are some areas which we have all areas that have rain, but this place has a minimum amount of rain of this amount, this amount, but it's always random but controlled in a certain manner. So I've talked about the minimum and the maximum from the random value, meaning that the random values will be of this range, the one that you connect from the random value, and the seed is basically to change to your liking, okay, the random values. And the ID, which is just to ensure that a certain group of points or faces or vertices, depending on the domain that you have chosen to work with, are going to be given the same amount to give out some control when using the random value node. Simply like that. And this was for float, and there is also other ones like Boolean, okay, simple like that. And right now everyone has been to the same amount, and unfortunately this part has been hidden. Now it's okay, so I can set it to 1, and using this Boolean we can put it to the selection. And right now if I set it to a very low amount, you can see like few amount of faces have been selected. And ID and seed are the same way as for float was working, and integer is the same, okay. It's just it's only the Boolean that looks so different. Even for vector is the same, but this time the randomness is in 3-dimensional, meaning that the randomness between 0 and 1, the randomness between in the x should be of which range, z of which range, so forth and so forth. Okay, let's return back to the Boolean, which looks somehow different, okay, which uses probability, as you can see. Now all these faces have an offset scale of 1, okay. If I set it to 0, you don't see anything, but if I move up to this value, you can see stuff's happening, and we can change the seed to our liking. So what's actually happening here that you're seeing right now is that Boolean values is always 0 to 1, okay, that there is no randomness. It's always 0 to 1. You can't put it in a random way. But what you can do when you set to Boolean is that you can choose how many faces do you want them to have 0, a Boolean of 0, or a Boolean of false, and how many faces do you want to have a Boolean of true or 1. That's by this probability. It looks like the number of geometry that we are working with and how much do you want. And the same as ID and seed, if one face of this kind is given a Boolean of 0, then all faces of this kind are given a Boolean of 0. That's the same, okay. That's the same as this thing working. Boolean is just choosing the amount, and this can be very helpful. For example, making trees, controlling how many branches that come out. For example, you want to make a tree that looks it's about to die, okay, you reduce the amount of branches that are coming out, and that it has, or the amount of leaves that it has. But the one that is good, you increase the amount of leaves, branches are enough, it's thick, so forth like that. There are so many tutorials especially use the random value to, and use this Boolean probability to control the randomness, the random branching, so forth and so forth. And I hope this tutorial helped you to understand the random value node, and hopefully you have understood, and it's going to help you when you're trying to use it in geometry nodes, okay, because it's among the few important nodes that I normally use. And thank you for watching. Hope I'll see you in another tutorial.